Isn't it fun going camping with your friends? The sheer joy of being surrounded by the twinkling stars, indulging in fun-filled activities, exchanging secrets, and narrating spine-chilling tales while gathered around a blazing campfire is unparalleled, right? However, what if all this takes a turn for the worse? What if your much-awaited outdoor excursion turns into a living nightmare? Allow me to recount my harrowing experience, where a camping trip with my friends transformed into a spine-tingling ordeal. 7 years ago, as we were cruising down the road in the convertible, Jack suddenly burst out laughing and drew our attention. "Hey, did you see that? Quan just swallowed a bug," he said, still laughing as if he had just delivered the best joke ever, while we all gave him a disapproving look. In response, Quan threw his backpack at Jack in annoyance, making him groan, while he said, "Hey, that's because of the speed of the convertible, you bastard," which made the rest of us laugh. "Why are you so offended? Don't you guys eat bugs for breakfast or something?" he jeered, thinking he was funny, which was only annoying. But Quan wasn't one to back down, and he responded with a sharp retort, "At least our parents are at the breakfast table, unlike yours." "Stop it, you guys. And Jack, you need to stop throwing insults as a joke." It was clear that Jack's sense of humor had gone too far, so I scolded him for his behavior. "Hey, men joke like that among each other. You're a girl, so you don't know," he said, pouting, feeling insulted by my actions. Henry, who had been quiet the whole time, finally spoke up. "I'm also a man, so how come I don't know about such jokes?" he asked, trying to diffuse the tension and lighten the mood. But Jack was already sulking and pouting, claiming that he was joking and we were being mean to him. We all knew his excuses were invalid, and we couldn't help but laugh while he glared at the road ahead with furrowed brows. Although we knew that Jack's intentions were not to cause harm and that he was trying to be funny, his jokes often crossed the line and were hurtful. We have all been victims of his rude sense of humor, but at the same time, he has had our backs whenever we needed him. So despite his weird personality, we genuinely cared about him. The 4 of us were going on a camping trip. There were supposed to be 5, but Claire canceled at the last minute, leaving me all alone with these goofs. Henry was the only person who seemed a bit reliable, not because he was my boyfriend, maybe a little because of that, but mostly because he acted more maturely than others when he needed to. We reached the campsite around 5 in the evening and set up our tents. Nobody else was around in that area except for us, which was fine since we would probably be louder than a truck horn. "So, who got the booze?" Jack asked, glancing in the direction of Quan. He pointed toward the car, and the 2 of them went to the car with arms locked to bring out the rest of the supplies. I could never understand these guys. Nearly an hour ago, they were like 2 negatively charged objects, but now they acted like long-lost brothers who had never quarreled. Releasing a deep sigh, I began to take the food out of my bag. My eyes met Henry, who seemed to be staring at me. "What?" I asked, which made him look away with the embarrassment of being caught. "Nothing," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. I dropped whatever I was doing, walked to him, and looked into his eyes as I asked, "Tell me." "You are just so beautiful that I can't help myself." I smiled while blushing to my ears at his words. "You're so cute." I placed a peck on his lips as I wrapped my hands around his neck, making him pull me and deepen the kiss. I loved my dork. "Gross, you two. Get a room. We're here for fun, not puke." I rolled my eyes at Quan's voice and turned to see them laughing while giving each other high fives. "Shut up, idiot," I said while grabbing a matchstick to start a campfire. When another attempt to light the fire failed, Jack laughed as he remarked, "Are you sure you know how to make a bonfire?" I glared at him in frustration, while he playfully laughed, taking a sip from his beer can. Henry came forward to help me, but the fire wasn't starting. That was when I noticed an eerie, thick white fog spreading in our surroundings and swallowing Jack. We heard his scream from a distance, sending chills down our spines. We started calling for him, but he didn't respond. When we were about to go inside the fog to look for him, an old man emerged. He was wearing all white, had a long white beard, and his eyes were closed. He was giving off an ominous vibe. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine when a part of his beard grew longer and grabbed Henry by his throat. And before I could blink, it pulled him in, and I heard a snap, which made me scream in terror. The man opened his eyes, which were white without any pupil or iris, and his mouth wider than a shark, before putting Henry's head in it, while the beard consumed the rest of the body. He then started crunching his head. The gruesome sight made me shudder in horror, making me so sick that I was ready to throw up when Quan grabbed my hand and started running. I was so horrified that I couldn't process what was happening, and that was when I felt Quan's hand being pulled away from me. I turned to see a white beard wrapped around him. I didn't want to let him go too, so I grabbed his hands even tighter and started pulling, but instead, I was the one being pulled toward the man. I saw a single tear fall from his eyes as Quan pulled away his hand to let me escape. I couldn't help but scream his name as I saw him being consumed before I started running. I kept running and running without looking back until I found the highway. He didn't follow me for some reason, and I don't remember how, but I somehow managed to get to a police station and report everything. They seemed not to believe me, but they still assured me they would look for my friends. After getting to my apartment, I felt sick and couldn't eat or sleep for days. I even threw up multiple times. When I finally managed to sleep, I found myself getting chased by the same old man whose mouth was open, and he was this close to catching me when I woke up panting, covered in sweat. The police never found my friends, and after what happened to them, I know they never will. But despite being able to escape it that night, I'm still getting chased by him every time I close my eyes.
For decades now, those huddled around their campfires on dark Virginia nights have shared a tale that has made their companions' blood run cold. Is the story of an escaped insane asylum patient, a man committed for the cold-blooded murder of his own family on Easter Sunday. Following his incarceration, he became obsessed with Easter-modified motifs, eggs, crucifixes, and most importantly, rabbits. Because following his freak escape from the psychiatric hospital, he was interred at our family killer escape into the woods around Colchester Overpass near Clifton, Virginia, where he found his only stable resource of food was rabbit meat. Over time, the escaped mental patient collected the skins of the rabbit he killed, somehow stitching them together in something that resembled a huge gore-stained rabbit costume. Anyone unlucky enough to stray into his patch of the woods found themselves subjected to the terrifying ordeal of being chased to the trees by an axe-wielding fursuited psychopath that soon came to be known as the Bunnyman. But despite the fact that the Bunnyman sounds like nothing but bone-chilling urban legend, the terrifying reality is there's much more truth than the story than we'd like to admit. Clifton wasn't always the vibrant suburban sprawl that it is now. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was a small and humble farming community centered around the towns of the railway station. But as Clifton grew and its population swelled, the residents became unhappy that they were so close to a state insane asylum. The solution was simple. The local government passed a measure to shut the asylum down, and the inmates being temporarily housed in the newly built Lorton prison. However, during transport, one inmate managed to wrestle free from prison guards and escape into some nearby woodland. The prisoner's name was Douglas Griffin. In a matter of record that a man by the name was convicted of murder by his own parents with an axe on Easter morning when he was just 12 years old. And his hearing, young Douglas seemed manic and deranged, completely absorbed by the Easter imagery present in his home on the day he killed his own mother and father. A judge spared no time and committed him to an insane asylum, and that's where he lived for 20 long years, right up until the day of his escape. Federal marshal, local law enforcement, and a handful of volunteers searched the woods near the site of Griffin's escape for months on end, using sniffer dogs, professional trackers, and even mounted patrols. But the only traces they found the FEM were the mutilated corpses of several half-eaten rabbits. By October of that year, Douglas Griffin was assumed dead, with law enforcement refusing to believe that he could have survived out in the woods for that long. But after 3 teenagers went missing, the search for them brought police officers right back to the very same area they've been hunting Douglas Griffin. And then one night, bloodhounds looking for the kids led officers to a small bridge with a rail line at the top and a road running under the bridge. Hanging from the bridge were the missing teens' decision bowed like the rabbits in the woods. The teens had apparently been walking home and had stumbled across Griffin hiding under the bridge. Moments after making the gruesome discovery, police officers heard a maniacal laughter coming from above them. Looking up to see a man in a rabbit's fur mask waving an axe above his head. Police then claimed that Griffin was hit by an oncoming train, although whether or not that's true or just an excuse for their failure to capture him, it's impossible to discern. But that didn't stop local newspapers from pumping out stories detailing the grisly deeds of the Bunnyman of Clifton. As far as I can tell, the Bunnyman legend appears to have started in the 1970s, but has its roots in unrelated real-life events. On the night of October 8, 1970, Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée were driving near Colchester Bridge, when Robert spotted something in the middle of the road that had him slamming on his brakes to avoid hitting it. There was a man, and what appeared to be a full-bodied gray suit on there was completely, with as Robert put it, something that looked a lot like bunny ears. The couple simply stared at the figure, dumbstruck, until they noticed the large hatchet in his hand, at which point they drove off again at high speed. Though neither Robert nor his fiancée were hurt, they were shaken by the incident and couldn't provide a lot of details. But with his pale outfits and ear-like head covering, Benetton police initially speculated that the man was a member of the KKK. The mysterious figure was quickly dubbed the Bunnyman by local newspapers, and it wasn't long before there was a second sighting. Less than 2 weeks later, a construction site security guard making his rounds in a new housing development caught the Bunnyman using an axe to smash the roof supports of new houses being built. After the newspaper ran the story, the Bunnyman called the local authorities, saying that he was against the spread of new housing divisions into his woods. Based on his voice and eyewitness accounts, police determined the Bunnyman was a local teen upset with the new housing development. He told police that he would meet them at the Colchester Bridge on Halloween, but never showed it was never seen again. The events were reported in the newspaper around the country, and teens from all over Virginia started to make their way to Colchester Bridge to look for the Bunnyman. Over 50 Bunnyman sightings were reported everywhere, from Maryland to Washington, D.C., though not a single sighting could be corroborated. The supernatural elements of the Bunnyman story only came when locals connected the Bunnyman news reports to an unsolved murder of a local girl that happened in 1918. 14-year-old Eva Roy was found beaten to death and hung near Colchester Bridge, and the prime suspect was an escaped mental patient who broke out of Lorton Prison, though he was eventually proved innocent of the crime. As years passed, the legend spread. Teens near the bridge would go on Bunnyman hunts in the woods, especially near Halloween. It seems horrifying that such a ridiculous-sounding story can have so many elements of truth to it. Just makes you wonder, how many other stories, myths, or legend that we're so quick to dismiss as false are actually based on terrifying, real-life events?
This is something I didn't realize the severity of till I was older. My mom had left me and my brother home alone. It was midday. My brother was 12, maybe 13, so I was 9 years old. Watching him play Xbox in our living room, he had his headset on talking to his friends. There was a knock from the door on our carport. I run and answer the door without looking. It's a grown man I've never seen before. We are separated by the screen door, which at the time was unlocked. He asks, "Are your parents home?" Horror washes over me. First of all, he's knocking from the carport, which is strange in and of itself. A stranger would knock on our front door, right? And our carport is empty. We only had one car and my mother had taken it. This man knows that my parents aren't home. I'm afraid. I don't know why, but I am scared. Immediately, my brother in the other room comes to mind. I've never had a father figure. My brother has always been the one who has made me feel safe. The strongest person in the whole world. Someone who could protect me in any situation. How most people would regard their father, I think. I feel as though I can barely speak. Wide-eyed, I manage to stutter out, "No, but, Big Brother here." Without even a moment's pause, this man reaches for the screen door and starts to open it. Like an act of God, divine intervention, an arm reaches out from behind me over my shoulder and grabs the door. My brother pushes past me, holding the door, forcing the man back with his presence, out into the carport, and closes the door behind him. The man tells my brother he was looking to buy some old swing set that was in our front yard at the time. My brother comes back in without saying anything to me, puts on his headset and continues playing. I sit down as well and continue watching him. I don't believe we ever told our mom. Luckily, I never encountered this person again, and it pretty much fades from my memory. But as I got older, it became one of the scariest things that ever happened to me.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I am now a 72-year-old man. This happened long ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland, circa 1969 or 1970. Just say my life at the time was in disarray. I had dropped out of college. My father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move to an isolated cabin, to live in contemplation and solitude, was welcome. I had some inheritance money to pay for it. To the best of my memory, I was there 8 to 9 months. No TV, but books and radio. I had a library card, and I can't remember if I even had a phone. The story begins when, a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog, and I took her in. Never could train her to do anything, but I fed her, and she was a sweet, if not the brightest, dog. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the isolated cabin. Hard to describe, but I felt like someone was watching. On many occasions, I thought someone might even be looking into my cabin window, watching us. The next phase was the shadowing or following. I knew the folks a half-mile down the lane, woods all around, and would sometimes visit them at night. Something was waiting for me, and followed closely in the woods beside me in the darkness. You could hear it easily, footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. This not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited, and to friends, and it spooked them big time. At night, it was out there around the cabin. And here's the funny thing. I was never afraid, never felt threatened. Not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I spent a good bit of time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There was a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for mile after mile. The whole of western Maryland was much more country than it is now. None of the development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and we came across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods, traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked slept in, garbage, food and drink, paper, what have you. Perhaps hunters, but much of it did not have the organized feel that you would get from experienced hunters. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe he sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch screen with a light door and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard with woods close by either side. Dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds, then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day, like they were offerings. I had to grab them up before the dog ate them, and this went on almost daily for several weeks. One night, very late, I was awoken by some sound. I lay in bed and heard something from the front porch. I hopped up and hit the lights, and I saw that hound dog who never learned to sit or stay, standing at the front door in a perfect pointer position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked. I heard the door slam and footsteps down the steps. I hit the spotlight but saw nothing. I went out. He had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more. The animal offerings got bigger and bigger. Larger birds, a possum, a woodchuck. It really wasn't funny. The final 2 gifts were legs, either from horses or even cows. Big and bloody. One was skinned, dear God. And the second to last day, the dog left me. I could hear her in the woods howling on a trail following a scent. I looked for her in every way I could. Came up in the following weeks, but to no avail. She left as she came. I moved back to Maryland's suburbs of D.C., got an apartment with a friend, got a job and moved on with my life. One day not long after, I picked up the Washington Post and there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville monster. It's described as a tall, yeti-like creature, fur-covered, on 2 legs that would pick out a family or person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. That attention, described in the article, was exactly what had happened to me. Following you at night, looking inside the house, gifts, and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot or Yeti, I might still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville, Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick, and back then, many folks knew how to live in the woods. They grew up that way, country folks. I think the monster was actually an escaped patient, or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. This is like all the homeless you see in the cities now, probably off his meds, but somehow functional and just lonely. He would pick people or families to adopt, so to speak. The camps in the woods could have been him. Nothing to do, he would make mischief. I think he liked me, but sensed that I was leaving. Now, I can't prove any of this, it's just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and his behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I don't think he could have survived until the 1980s. Deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelter of hospitals. Unprotected, the mentally ill do die, but once in a while, they find their way to you.